We hope you're well fed. We hope you're well rested because it's time for some tennis. Welcome back to the first Eat Sleep Tennis of the year. It is Australian Open time. One of the best parts about tennis, it's just the third week of the season, and we have a Grand Slam tournament. Candace, how's it going? It's been a while since we've seen you. I heard you've been contacted by famous horse trainers and such, but have you been watching tennis? Are you ready to go? Are you excited to watch the Australian Open? It's at a pretty good time for you. Nice nightcap.
It's always a good time for me. I am excited. So much uncertainty always around this tournament, so that makes it fun from a betting perspective. And it's been a while for all of us since we've done a show, but I'm glad really nothing has happened in the interim.
I like it. I can dig it. Now, Steve, you're a little bit closer to the action. It is the Australian Open. You are our Australian correspondent. How are you feeling? Are you ready to go? Do you got ears on the ground, feet on the ground? Are you going? Did you get tickets?
I've got some tickets, not a lot of tickets. Yeah, look, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a busy couple of weeks, but it's just nice to from tomorrow have some form of tennis to talk about as opposed to off-court action.
This is true. A lot of off-court action, which is a pretty good segue into the men's draw if we're ready, folks. Of course, the first quarter is highlighted and started by one Mr. Novak Djokovic, who we're not really going to talk about whether or not he's going to play. As the time of recording this, he has a court date the day before the tournament starts to, again, try to clear this all up. For the sake, of the discussion, we're going to assume that he's in the draw. There's a possibility, that he's here. There's a possibility the draw gets kind of rejiggered and Andrei Rublev would be on the spot. There's a possibility that it goes on so late that there's a lucky loser here. But again, for the sake of the discussion, we'll assume that Novak Djokovic is in and ready to go. He is here as our one seed. You start to look at some of the other names here. Christian Garin kind of there in the middle of the draw. Cam Norrie and Sebastian Korda. That'll be a fun first round match. Matteo Berrettini. Some kind of interesting names in here. But again, a lot of discussion when it comes to men's tennis is driven by that name at the top. What do you think, Candace? Do you think Novak can come in without enough preparation and still get through this?
I mean, if anybody can, he can. I'm inclined to go against because he hasn't had an ideal preparation. I think for me, there are a few names that are interesting, but maybe none more than Gael Monfils. Of course, we've seen him play well, especially, I guess it's about a week or so ago now, out there in Adelaide. So he's gotten himself off to a quick start. With him, it's usually about his health and his focus, and he does seem to be really engaged in his tennis right now, which is a huge positive. And we always know that the talent is there with him. It's just a matter of if he's able to put everything together. And it certainly seems that way. So I think Monfils maybe the most interesting of me as far as the not so obvious players are concerned in this portion of the draw. You did put a highlight there to that Norrie Korda match. I'm really, really interested in that match. I have Sebastian Korda winning it. But even if Cam Norrie were to win, it doesn't necessarily get easier, right? You have the potential of Moutet facing him second round, who, you never know what you're going to get with him, but at his best, he's very good, especially when he plays aggressively. You have Fognini there. You have PCB. So someone like Cam Norrie, if you're looking for a seed who's particularly vulnerable, he'd be the one who I think you'd be going with. But as far as positives, who's the one to keep an eye on? I think it's Gael Monfils.
I like that. That'll be kind of interesting. He's always a fun name to watch. I'm maybe a little less optimistic about his ability to win this many matches at kind of where he is, but there is some interesting names here. I mean, again, we'll see what Djokovic can do, but Alcaraz, this will be kind of his first time at a Grand Slam as someone that'll get some more attention. I like what a lot of the other names you mentioned here. What do you see here, Steve?
I see, some similarities, I think, with what my thoughts are and Candace's there. I think the big unknown or the wild card in here is Monfils, particularly with the weather forecast being a little bit cooler for the first week as well. He had that good first week in Adelaide, and then kind of shut up shop early last week to get to Melbourne. And yeah, it's a great spot in the draw, as is his spot, if he were to end up in Rublev's part of the draw, if there are any changes made. But I think they're probably the biggest name to keep an eye on here, and looking to the right side of the draw for those who are watching online at the moment. I think, Carlos Alcaraz is the other name that does stand out here. I think, assuming that Novak is in, I think those two are players that are capable of challenging Novak off often interrupted preparation. And I'm probably most interested in that Berrettini-Nakashima first round matchup in terms of the quality there, as well as Norrie versus Korda. So it'll be interesting to see what unfolds there. But looking at this section, I'm most interested in Monfils and Alcaraz.
I really was not expecting this much Monfils talk. I'm going to be honest. I'm a little surprised.
Neither was I.
Both of you brought him up. This is like whole minutes of Monfils chatter. Berrettini was the only name that stuck out to me, kind of, sans Djokovic here as someone who could win. I was a little disappointed in his draw. Nakashima is a really tough opponent in the first round. Alcaraz is someone that you don't want to see later on, whether it be Norrie, Korda, maybe even PCB, who plays a little bit better on these hard courts in that next match. It's going to be tough sledding for Berrettini, but I still think these conditions are pretty good for him, the fast courts. And again, when it comes to Grand Slam tennis, especially on the men's side, the mental grind of 5 sets and having kind of a history of experiencing that and knowing what it presents is a huge advantage for someone like him over some of these younger players. I mean, Nakashima is a true talent, but I really wonder if he's mentally at a state where he can really challenge someone like Berrettini here in best of 5 tennis. But a pretty good quarter overall. Any other thoughts from you guys before we jump into the second?
No, happy to keep on moving on.
Another quarter, loaded full of talent here. Alexander Zverev, our seed here at the top. Rafael Nadal for the first time this year, down at the bottom. You look around in the middle, Karatsev off a title. Khachanov and Kudla should be a fun first-round match there. Hubie Hurkacz had a great finish to the season, and interested to see what he can do. The Canadian Denis Shapovalov is always extremely talented. Riley Opelka serve should be really dangerous here. And again, I'll circle back to Zverev. He is one of the few guys that doesn't have a Grand Slam title yet, but has beaten Novak Djokovic a couple times as someone who can, maybe slay the giant, if you will. But the draw really didn't do him too many favors, did it, Steve?
Not really, no. It's a stacked little section here of players who have shown the ability to match it with the top of the ATP across the best of 3 sets, but across best of 5, it's a different game entirely. So looking outside of Zverev there, down to the bottom there, Nadal looked okay without being exceptional in his title in the first week in Melbourne when when most of the main players were playing in the ATP Cup. So he did look solid there, but I just worry about him over best of 5 sets over a fortnight on hard at this stage of his career. A couple of names, I guess, in the middle there, you've got, Denis Shapovalov is one to keep an eye on there. He did kind of build into his ATP Cup form after having to isolate when he first arrived in Sydney. So he's one to keep an eye on, as well as at the top right of screen for those watching along, Hubert Hurkacz, who hasn't performed well here in the past, but I think he is one who's capable, along with Karatsev there, who looked great in Sydney. There's a number of players there that can cause a bit of grief to these top players. And even, Thanasi Kokkinakis is a potential second-round matchup for Rafael Nadal. It's a pretty stacked little section.
Yeah, and apologies to Rafa. I apparently missed the fact that he played at Melbourne and won a title, but I guess Nadal playing against Barakas, Griekspoor, Drew, Rusevori, and Cressy didn't really catch my attention. So he does have some tennis kind of under his belt here. But Candace, it doesn't seem like you're too optimistic about him at all. However, there is somebody you do like in this section that you think can pop through this quarter and maybe do well this fortnight.
There is. I mean, on the Nadal front, it's going to be interesting to see him here playing best of 5. That's not usually something I think we tend to worry about with Nadal, though at the tail end of last year, we were talking about how maybe people were rating him highly in best of 5 matches off of reputation, more so than what we were seeing. I'm just a little bit concerned post-COVID. He's mentioned that he has had some moments in his recovery that haven't been ideal. And we've seen here in America with several sports stars, when they've gotten COVID, even when it's been a mild case, they'll talk about being winded, a little bit more tired than typical. So I'm just taking a little bit more of a wait and see approach, I suppose, with Nadal on that front. But I really like Shapovalov in here. I like his draw a lot. Those first couple of rounds, I don't want to ever say any rounds look easy, but there's definitely top players who have much more difficult draws on the outset. So allowing him to kind of work his way in should be a positive. Obviously, he's playing very, very well right now. And I think if you're going to put him with another top-seeded player, Zverev is a good one for him. He's beaten him before. He's played him strongly in recent times. So Shapovalov, the one who jumps out for me. On the bottom end, if Nadal doesn't come through, I do think Hurkacz is the one. Nothing too crazy. As Alex mentioned, he finished off the back end of last year really strong, and he does seem to be a player on the rise. And he has played well against Nadal in the past as well. But Shapo going to be the one that I'm really keeping an eye on in this portion of the draw.
Yeah, tough sledding for Mr. Nadal. Lots of opposition there. How do you see this quarter shaking out, Steve?
If I had to pick in the end here, look, I do like Shapovalov and Hurkacz to make some relatively decent runs. I've got Karatsev on a ever so slight upset alert in the first round against Minard, who looked solid in his hard court efforts in the fortnight leading up to the Australian Open. But look, I think this is going to be one of those ones where look, it looks really, really competitive, but there might be a little bit of chaos here at some point. I think something's going to happen in this quarter, whether it's Khachanov knocking off Nadal or something along those lines. I think, if you made me pick someone and one person, I would still go Zverev, but I just don't think there's any value in him in the market at the moment.
Yeah, the only value that might be there with him would be his price, his outright price. Again, he's right around 3-1. You could do a little bit better there. His price to win the quarter, though, to reach the final is kind of tough. But if there is some kind of nonsense there in the first quarter, all of a sudden he moves into a really nice spot. But again, something I like, but maybe don't necessarily love. Any other thoughts on this quarter from you guys?
No, let's head on to the third, shall we?
Indeed, let's shall. Casper Ruud, our seed at the top. Stefanos Tsitsipas down there at the bottom. This quarter, to me, probably one of the most wide open ones, although kind of some interesting pockets. You look at kind of the section there on the left, which is the top part of the quarter. Sinner's in there. You've got Musetti in there. Again, Casper Ruud, some young players that have been doing very well. Some other older names. Curious to see what Andy Murray can do. It's always fun to watch him. He somehow finds ways to take quick matches and turn them into long ones, but it's always kind of fun and exciting. Bautista Agut is kind of the name that I was curious to see. He's someone that had kind of a tough year last year, hasn't played great tennis in a while, but is generally pretty comfortable playing here down under, and I think kind of has a nice draw here. But I'm curious to see kind of the winner of maybe that match between him and Francis Tiafoe, who can kind of make it the furthest from there. What do you think of the third quarter, Steve?
I would not be surprised at all here if we had a Jannik Sinner versus Taylor Fritz quarterfinal. I think when you look at the top part of this draw, I think it's a perfect spot. Jannik Sinner couldn't have asked for a better draw, I don't think. I think Sousa in the first round, the winner of Johnson Thompson. Look, maybe worst case scenario, Andy Murray over best of 5. I don't think that's the worst. That's not a terrible matchup for him. And then maybe we're looking at either Ruud or De Minaur in the fourth round. I think that's a great spot in the draw for Sinner from what we've seen from him over the last 12 months. Ignore the fact he lost in the first round last year here. He started cramping after an extensive build-up and quick turnaround and playing Shapovalov in the first round. So I think that's probably the key one there. Looking to the bottom half, I'm happy to play around Tsitsipas given his elbow issues were impacting his serving at the ATP Cup, and I'd be surprised if those things turned around relatively quickly. So looking to the top, I think it's that third round matchup potentially between Taylor Fritz and Bautista Agut that's going to kind of shape this little section here. Dimitrov has a semi-decent draw, but it's hard to trust him, across a fortnight. So I'd be going with Sinner in the top half. And yeah, I think the winner of Bautista Agut versus Fritz will be the one to get through to the quarterfinal from this bottom half of the section.
I like it. A different American, but it's always fun to see one of those guys kind of pop through the draw. What do you think of this quarter, Candace?
I think it's a deceiving quarter in that when you look at the first round matchups, you look at it and you say, oh, this is wide open. But the problem with it for mine is I would favor who's in the top portion of this quarter, Rude or Sinner. And it's those young guns who are on the rise who I find are perpetually overvalued in the markets because people are anticipating that big breakthrough on a stage like this. Well, I can't talk. That big breakthrough on a stage like this. So the value just isn't there. And that part of it is a little bit frustrating. I completely agree that Sinner's Draw is beautiful. Maybe about a week or so ago when I was starting to look through some of those early markets, you're seeing Sinner at this short to beat him, and then the draw comes out and I'm like, oh, I can't do it. So beautiful draw for Jannik Sinner. I have him going against RBA. I'm very, very intrigued to see what we see from Bautista Agut this year. So I have those two going against each other, but I do think Sinner in particular has a really cozy spot in this draw.
Yeah, it is kind of a nice spot. And, Steve, you touched on it a little bit. I don't know what we're going to see from Stefanos Tsitsipas, which, offers you not only a lot of intrigue in the quarter, but a lot of value here. So it's a good quarter to kind of go through, try to pick off some names you like, because Tsitsipas still does soak up, a lot of value here, despite A, being a little bit injured, and B, having said a few times in the last couple of weeks that maybe he's more interested in other stuff and not quite 1,000,000,000% focused on tennis. But we'll see how it goes for the Greek. Any other thoughts from you guys in this quarter before we jump into the fourth?
No, I think that would be, if any player wanted to find themselves in a particular quarter, I do think it is that one. If you were able to know before the draw that you would end up in a quarter that had Rude and Tsitsipas as your top 8 seeds, I think you'd take that every day of the week.
Absolutely. Although I would say that maybe somebody has an easier spot in the draw, although Daniel Medvedev doesn't have to play himself. This looks like just a dream of a quarter, and just the draw really did Mr. Medvedev a lot of favors. Anybody that he's really worried about kind of got stuck in the top half, whether it be Djokovic, Nadal, Zverev. He's not going to see them until the final. You look at this quarter, and I mean, really, I'll start with a question that usually we ask about Djokovic's quarter. Candace, can anybody in this quarter beat Daniel Medvedev?
Muted. Had to do it at some point. It only took 16 minutes. No, I don't. If he's healthy and playing to the level that we're accustomed to from him, I don't think so. Yeah, I just don't see it. I think he makes it through his quarter. I'm not going to necessarily say it's going to be easy. You have guys in there like Ugo Humbert who will make you work, but he's comfortably better than him. So, no, I think Medvedev makes it through his quarter. Yes.
It is. It's hard to even kind of pick out another name that'll challenge him. With all due respect to Rublev, I think Medvedev's kind of shown us by now that he's going to win that match unless something kind of goofy goes on. So I'll ask you again, kind of the same question, Steve. Can anybody here knock Medvedev out?
Look, I think the biggest threat to Medvedev is Medvedev himself, and I think he's shown that through the number of the losses that he's had over the last 6 months or so has been more a capitulation from him. So I guess when you think about that, it's more around who can hang tough and hang in the longest to potentially put him off his game. When you look through it, I don't think Kyrgios is going to be able to do it for long enough. He might be able to do it for a set. I don't see that happening in the second round, even if he makes it. Humbert, was able to do it in the ATP Cup, but I just don't see again over best of 5 that being a particular issue. Diego Schwartzman, maybe, like if he could just really just keep getting the ball back and being a brick wall for him. But I don't think I'd be jumping in confidently there. So then you look to the other side as a potential quarterfinalist, and if Rublev's there, I still don't think that's going to be much of an issue for Medvedev on their past matchups. I think the camera defeated Medvedev more than Rublev did in their last meeting, and Auger-Aliassime was pretty poor, I think, in their ATP Cup meeting, and probably still has some nightmares from the semi-final of the US Open. So I think his biggest threat is the man that stares back at him when he looks in the mirror.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at this draw, I think we're finally at the point where Medvedev may kind of get the Djokovic pricing. Again, if somehow he's removed from this market, Medvedev goes to kind of -110, -125 to win this tournament. It's just a bunch of value on him here. So it's a quarter that, it'll be fun to watch Medvedev. I'm curious to see, if Isner can kind of find any form here. Krajinovic and Schwartzman might be kind of a fun first round match, but overall, it's kind of Medvedev here. Oh, Ruusuvuori FAA, that'll be kind of fun too. Any other thoughts from you guys in this quarter before we wrap on the men's draw and jump into our picks?
You tipped it off there right at the end. I think the first round match to really note in this section is Felix against Ruusuvuori. I'd be inclined to put something very small on the Finn in that match. And if Felix were to make it through somehow, I think him potentially against Davidovich Fokina is another upset alert. So you might be able to work your way there trying to get around Felix. I think the draw for him, we kind of glossed over talking about Medvedev, but I think the draw for Felix is brutal, especially when you take into account his level of play recently.
All right, big moment here, folks. Let's see if Steve is ready to transition to doing the picks for the first time this year. He looks ready. He looks excited. He looks fresh.
I am ready as long as you kick things off, Alex. Who's your ace for the tournament?
My ace for the tournament, and I think this comes as no surprise, Daniel Medvedev. He was someone that I was excited to pick before all the nonsense of the last month. Now, given all that nonsense, it looks even better. Then the draw comes out, and it's just an absolute gift for him. There's not anybody in his half of the draw. I mean, if I feel certain about anything, it's that Daniel Medvedev will be in the final, and I'm not sure that there's anybody on the other side who can really knock him off. So he's my pick to win this tournament.
Perfect. And I'll just roll into mine because mine is Medvedev as well, but I don't think there's value in his price at the moment with everything that's going on. I got him just north of $4 or 3-1 a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think there's value looking at his price now everywhere with all the uncertainty around Novak. So I've decided to kind of look a little bit elsewhere, which I'll discuss in my value pick. But Candace, who have you gone for as your ace of the tournament?
I've gone with Shapovalov. My gut, I stuck to it. I was tempted to slide in Medvedev or Rublev there for the pick to win and put Shapovalov for the value, but we're going to go with the big price. I have been taken by the way that he's been playing, especially considering his health issues just a couple of weeks ago. So big positive to see him playing well since then. I think his draw is fantastic. And, this is a player that we know has always had the talent and the ability. I think he was kind of in Felix's shadow a little bit last year, which was a bit surprising. We expected maybe more from him and didn't get it till towards the end of the year. The tools are there. We just need him to be maybe a little bit more restrained, I suppose, which isn't typically what we say about players. Typically, we want them to be more aggressive. But if anything, I want to see a little bit more restrained Shapovalov, and I think we're seeing that. I think he's looking a bit more of a mature player, and that's what he's going to need to be here. But he has a beautiful draw.
And he is actually someone who was on my short list for my value pick, but I've ended up going down a slightly different path and gone with Jannik Sinner. I think there's still 70-1 available on the exchange here in Australia for him. When you look at the draw, as I said, it's a pretty favourable draw. Hopefully it's one that he can actually take advantage of. It's not too hot in the first week, so we shouldn't see too many fade outs from him. And I think if he can find himself, in a couple of night sessions late in the tournament, I think he really has the ability to be a surprise packet to those top players in the draw, particularly over the best of 5. So I have gone with Jannik Sinner. Candace, who have you gone for as your value pick?
Sticking with Shapo. So obviously he's a big price on the board. And again, just given how he's played recently, I would have expected him to be trimmed up a lot more than he was. So taking advantage.
And Alex, who have you gone for with your value?
Well, Steve, I think you're wrong about Medvedev. I think there's a lot of value in his number right now. Whether Djokovic plays or not, you're looking at numbers around plus 140, plus 150. Given his draw, given the fact that Djokovic is going to be less than 100% to be here, given how hard Djokovic's draw is, I mean, he might have to go Berrettini, Zverev, Medvedev here to kind of finish things out just to win the final. I think there is some value here in a guy who I think showed us a little bit in the U.S. Open last year. Again, Djokovic pretty burnt out at that point, but Medvedev has shown us that he is probably the best hard court player in the world unless Djokovic is playing at his best, and I don't think that we're going to see that. So I'm happy to grab some Medvedev to win the tournament, and specifically look for his price to reach the final. Any number minus 125 or 1.8 or better looks great. Interesting.
Look, I do think I do like your thought there around that to make the final, because I think it is a more generous little section there, knowing that you've got, if Novak does play and Zverev, they're both in the top half of the draw there. So they're the players that we like and that we've found some value in. Now, if we go to the other side, who are some players that we, I guess, can forgive or maybe not, we're not necessarily keen to jump into at the price? We can start maybe with you, Candice. Who's your unforced error for the tournament?
So my unforced error is going to be Nadal. I think when you're dealing in any sport with players who, we know that they've had COVID, it's going to be an individual by individual basis of how you're going to treat them afterwards. I mentioned someone like Shapovalov, and we've seen him play really well since then. So I have more confidence. Plus, I know that his draw is much kinder early, and he can kind of ease his way in. That's not necessarily the case for Nadal. I'm glad that he does have some tournament play under his belt. I haven't been super taken by what I've seen. I do think there were concerns at the end of last year about his 5-set prowess to begin with, and this only makes me a little more concerned. His draw is not easy. It's going to make him work early, and he is always a player who's been a little bit more vulnerable at the beginning of a tournament versus the end. So I'm going to go Nadal here for my unforced error.
Perfect. And Alex, who have you gone for as your unforced error for the tournament?
It was a name that I giggled at when you mentioned it just a minute or two ago. Nick Kyrgios always gets a bunch of attention and ends up in this draw. I'm not even really sure when the last time he played tennis was. He seems more interested in, kind of supporting Novak Djokovic and paying attention to all of that. It's also the NBA season, so he's probably going to be watching basketball instead of really caring about what's going on. Happy to give him a pass and really kind of check him off first off the list this time.
I think that's the thing. He might win round one, but you can't see. It's hard to see him getting past Medvedev in round two. So, look, good luck to him. Hopefully he can find some form, but off the injury-interrupted way into the tournament and COVID, it's going to be tough for Nick. I have gone for Stefanos Tsitsipas as my unforced error. I just think there's too many question marks. We saw him pull out of the finals at the end of last year, had surgery on his arm, and was pretty emotional, I think, after his one of his matches in the ATP Cup. So he pulled out of the first one, and then I think his second match. And he was really struggling with his serve and generating power and precision with that. So I'm happy to avoid Tsitsipas, or at least watch him for a round or two before even contemplating getting involved there. Now, turning to the overvalued players, mine kind of falls on along a similar line to Candice's unforced error there with Rafael Nadal. I think, and in looking at his price, that I just think too much has to go right for Nadal in the first week or the first kind of 4 to 5 rounds for him to be physically in a position to be a threat come the quarters, semis, and final of the tournament. I think when we saw him play here last year, it was 2 sets to love up on Tsitsipas and started to struggle a little bit more, through that 3rd, 4th, and 5th set. And it looked like the week and the tournament had caught up with him a little bit there. I'm just worried, and another year on, he didn't look fantastic in that, albeit a title-winning week in Melbourne, a couple of weeks ago. I'm just preferring to go down the path of backing some of the other players, I think, at the top of the market. So I have gone against Nadal here. Candice, who have you gone against, or who's your overvalued player currently looking at the draw?
It's interesting because I feel like I could make a much longer list of players who I feel are overvalued in this tournament than I could of players who I think can win. I don't like the odds for Berrettini. I don't like them for Felix, but I ended up going with Cam Norrie. He's a larger price, but he is one of those 3 that I was most confident in hating his draw. I do not even like him in the first round. And even if he were to get through that, I wouldn't like him in the second round either. So I'll go with Cam Norrie, but if you wanted the full short list for me, it'd be Berrettini and Felix there as well.
And to wrap up our coverage of the men's draw, Alex, who is your overvalued player?
You covered him pretty well, Steve, in your unforced error. I don't know how anybody could put any money on Tsitsipas, given how, he's looked, given how he's talked, given where he is in this draw. I mean, I guess it's better than being in the top half, but, even at kind of a 20-1 price, I'm happy to pass on him altogether. I think you'd just be kind of nuts to back him again, given how he's looked and been talking the last couple of days.
More than fair enough there. It'll be interesting to see how he does go, and particularly if Novak does come out of the draw, because it does really open things up for all of these players who haven't won a slam, with the likes of Dominic Thiem also missing here in action in Melbourne. Any final thoughts on the men's draw before we get into the women's? And Alex cracks a smile for the first time in 2022.
Come on now. I've cracked several smiles.
Shall we get straight in?
Bummed when we get to the fourth quarter there. Steve's just egging me on. It's just unnecessary.
We know what you like. We know what you like.
Well, yeah, it's much more entertaining. I'm not going to have to talk about like 3 players over and over again. First quarter of the women's draw, and I will actually say, I will point out and congratulate Miss Ashley Barty, the #1 ranked player for 3 years in a row. That was kind of a surprise to me. She had done it that many years in a row. But #1 seed here already has a title under her belt. You look through the draw down there. Look at that. 4th round, Naomi Osaka. Looks like we'll have an Osaka-Barty 4th round match there. I think that'll be obviously pretty exciting. Ons Jabeur, a seed, unfortunately carrying an injury. We'll see kind of what happens there. Maria Sakkari and a handful of other names. But start with you here, Candace. How do you see this quarter shaking out?
I think it's a pretty nice one there for Ash Barty towards the top. I think she'll be able to kind of ease her way in just a touch, which is going to be great. I mean, it's kind of amazing because I feel like this time last year we were all talking about like, well, Ash Barty, how much longer is this going to last? You know, she's been so propped up, and credit to her, she has played incredibly well and more than deserved of her position now amongst the other women in this game. And I think this is a nice draw for her. I expect her to make her way through pretty comfortably in there. You mentioned Osaka at the bottom of her section. I think, Osaka obviously with a lot more questions, having that injury, having to take a little bit of time here, a little bit of an unplanned break, I suppose, before she heads into the tournament as she tries to recover from that. Mentally, we never quite know where she's at either. So if you were to have a top player against, Ash Barty, I don't think typically you would have said Osaka, but maybe at this point in time, it's not a bad one to have against you just with some of those questions around. You mentioned Ons Jabeur, really, really disappointing to catch that injury so late coming into this. So not really exactly sure what we're going to expect from her coming into this portion of the draw. She has a little bit tough there right off the bat, but I think for me, I'm going to be looking towards Ash Barty. Sakkari, of course, looms large there on the bottom portion, but I think this is Barty's for the taking.
Yeah, I think Barty definitely comes out of here. It's just going to be really fun to have all that talk with her and Osaka. And, kind of from a value perspective, those are the 2 tournament favorites right there. And they're going to meet in round 4. On the other side, some fun names. We'll see if Sakkari can take advantage of a little bit of a soft draw, as well as Pegula. I'm curious to see who's going to be in the quarterfinal. What say you, Stephen?
Look, it's hard to go past Barty here. I think when you roll through that draw, yes, there is going to be all that talk through the first week around that potential matchup with Osaka. But look, I actually think looking at form and lead-in performances, that there's every chance that we get a Roland Garros semi-final rematch from a couple of years ago with Barty against Anisimova, based off how well she started her collaboration with Darren Cahill. So I am going with Barty here out of this quarter. Looking to the bottom, I'd love to see Jessica Pegula put in a more improved performance than what we saw in the lead-in tournaments. And she has a lot of points to defend here from last year. Maria Sakkari, I haven't got involved with this time after a couple of painful near misses with her last year across a couple of tournaments. So I just haven't quite found value in her price here. And I've actually got Ons Jabeur on upset alert, I think, in the first round. I just need to see her on court and see how she's playing before I jump in there. So if I had to pick someone in this quarter, it would be the top seed, Ash Barty.
It really does seem like the easy choice. Just so many question marks with, Sakkari's inability to beat some better players. Pegula's tough start here. Osaka kind of openly admitting that she hasn't been totally focused and that her body is actually fatigued after a couple matches. So seems like a nice start here for Ashley Barty. Any other thoughts from you guys before we jump into the second quarter?
Nope.
I would guess not. Barbara Krejcikova at the top, Paula Badosa at the bottom. A really fun quarter here. Madison Keys off a title win here, playing some great tennis. Curious to see what she can do. Coco Gauff continues to get better over and over every single week. Again, Badosa's really great. Krejcikova really good. What do you see here, Steve?
I see another name that you maybe didn't mention there in Victoria Azarenka. as someone who might be able to pop up here and cause a little bit of trouble in this section. I think when you look through and if you break this quarter down into, well, 4 quarters again, I think she's in probably the best section there, being closest to Alina Svitolina in the draw. And you look at the players in between them, and I don't see anyone there who's a huge threat for Azarenka if she's fit. So looking to that, I think if she can really build her performances across the first week, I think she's in with a great chance here. Krejcikova is probably the other one, I guess, on that side that, you know, her consistency across the last 12 months is probably been unmatched, I think, at WTA level. Looking to the bottom half of the section, I think, you know, Madison Keys, that was a great performance in Adelaide. It wasn't the toughest draw, though. This is another level up. It'll be interesting to see how she goes against Kenin first up there. And looking down to the bottom, you know, maybe, you know, Kostyuk could make a little bit of a run there. She did look, you know, relatively good on court in Adelaide, losing in 3 sets to Coco Gauff. But, you know, it is going to be tricky, and I'm curious to see who can match it with Paula Badosa there through the first couple of rounds. But if I had to pick someone in terms of, you know, looking at the odds now and the strength, or, you know, I guess relative weakness of the draw, Azarenka, I think, is one who could surprise here in this quarter.
Yeah, I wonder how she can do it. It's been a long time since we've seen her had a nice sustained run of success at one tournament, let alone a Grand Slam. But she's had a lot of success here in the past. If she is in good shape, which is certainly possible this early in the season, it would be fun to watch. What do you think of this quarter, Candace?
I find this section to be a lot of fun. And, you know, that's always one of the hallmarks when we talk about women's tennis, is we get more of these sections that look a bit more chaotic. And I think that appears to be the case here. I could totally understand the Azarenka angle, completely agree that if she is 100% fit, she really should make it through this portion. I just wonder if she really is there. And that's going to be the part that, you know, the time will tell, I suppose, a little bit. But again, Svitolina, a perfect other top seed to have kind of around her in close quarters, because she's just physically dominant, I think, over Svitolina, and really always has been. If you're taking the quarter as a whole, I'm drawn to Madison Keys. I completely agree the draw wasn't the strongest when she was just able to win. But I would also say that I do think that win over Coco was big. You know, I think Madison is a little bit in the shadow of some of the other American women, at least from a media perspective, when you watch the tournaments here. And I think that was a big one for her, bigger than just the scoreline would show for you. So I think she comes in here with a ton of confidence, and that's always what she needs. We know that she has the skills. We know she has the power. So I'm going to be really, really interested to see what we see from Madison Keys here. I think this could be a really big week for her, or 2 weeks.
Yeah, I like what you said about her kind of taking pride in the fact that Coco Gauff seems to be the top American. If you listen to kind of the media and stuff, I mean, she is the highest ranked, I think, at this point, and pretty comfortably the most talented. But it's fun to see Keys kind of reach back and really care. This is a fun quarter overall, but I really like Krejcikova. I think we saw last week what she's capable of. Not only the variety in her game from having played so much doubles, but her ability to be mentally tough in big situations, given the fact that, you know, she's already won several Grand Slams as a doubles player. She's been number 1 in the world before. I mean, all that kind of nervousness is old hat for her, where it can be pretty tough for a lot of these other women. So Krejcikova was who I had picked coming out of here. I think this is a nice spot for her, and I'm curious to see how she looks against Barty there in the semifinals. Any other thoughts from you guys here in the second quarter?
The only player that we haven't mentioned that I'm curious to see how she goes here is Donna Vekic, considering she finished off last year with the title. Haven't seen her since, but I'm just curious to see how she stacks up in that little pocket of the draw there, just as a slight underdog against Alison Risk, which seems to be a decent price, I think, looking at it for the first round.
Yeah, that'll be a fun match to watch. We like Donna quite a bit, but tough to trust somebody that hasn't played in so long. Looking at the third quarter here, Anett Kontaveit, our seed at the top, Garbiñe Muguruza down there at the bottom, Simona Halep, Elena Rybakina, and I think that kind of defines what's going on here. There's a bunch of names in the middle that are fun, some interesting first-round matches, but I think kind of the 4 seeds there at top and bottom are going to be the big story here. What do you think, Candace?
I agree to a degree. It'll be interesting to see what happens there with Kontaveit. I don't think she has necessarily potentially the easiest couple of rounds. Sinyakova, while she should beat her, she typically plays her tough, so that could be a difficult first round match. I'd love to see Kontaveit against Clara Towson. That could be a lot of fun if we get that in round number 2. You mentioned some of the bigger seeds and names in there. Rybakina is always very interesting in these draws. You never expect her to make her way all the way through, but she can do some damage if she sticks around for a couple of rounds. I expect that to be the case here. But my eye is taken to Simona Halep. Obviously, last year really was just injury riddled throughout the course of the year. We never really saw the best of her. And I just wonder, with a little bit of time, sometimes players just need a little bit of downtime. And I wonder if we're able to see the Simona Halep of a couple of years ago, because we know how dangerous she is and how good she is on this surface. I certainly hope that's the case. If it is, I don't think she has the worst draw in the world. And I think the best part of things for her is those first couple of rounds don't look too overwhelmingly difficult. And so being able to ease her way in is going to be key here, especially for a player like her who not only had those injuries last year, but I do think really lost a little bit of confidence and kind of build her confidence these first couple of rounds. And we'll see what she has in her arsenal. But I certainly hope we see the best from Simona Halep.
I do too. I just continue to worry about her physically. Nagging back injuries and calf injuries and things are not necessarily great for tennis players, maybe on the wrong side of the age hill, if you will. But she did look pretty good in her first kind of run there through that tournament, and has a few matches here to kind of get in shape before we see, which hopefully is a pretty fun kind of round 4 match. Steve, what do you think of this quarter?
Oh, I wanted to mention one more thing. Sorry. If you're going to have an upset alert in here, I would put it towards Raducanu with Sloane Stephens going against her first round. Obviously, it's a tricky matchup to have right off the bat. And, Sloane, she's had a pretty good couple of weeks, and I expect her to be pretty happy heading into the tournament.
I like that. That'll be fun. All right, Steve, your turn unless Candace is going to interrupt you again.
Look, I am drawn to one name in particular here in this quarter, and that's Elena Rybakina. I think, when you look through that first couple of rounds, I don't think there's anyone that's going to significantly trouble her, or be able to expose her weaknesses unless Elise Mertens turns back the clock a couple of years. So she's probably the one that I'm keeping an eye on here most. I'm pretty happy to play around Kontaveit. I think when you look through her 2021 overall, she won, or I think it was tied. They kind of shared the lead-up tournament before the Australian Open, and then she lost in the third round of the Slam, lost in the third round of Roland Garros, won the lead-up tournament to Wimbledon, and then lost in the first round of Wimbledon, and then won the lead-up tournament to the US Open, and then lost early there as well. So I think she's showing that she can beat those players kind of, ranked 20, 30 and below consistently. She just isn't cracking it against the top players on the big stage. And I think that kind of showed again against Krejcikova in Sydney a couple of days ago. Had 7 match points, couldn't get it done. She just hasn't quite shown it, I think, at Grand Slam level to be justifying the price she is at the moment. So that leads me to Rybakina in that top half. Looking to the bottom, good luck trying to figure out what's going on there. If Muguruza can come in and play some semi-decent tennis, then maybe she can make another run here. But I'm not seeing, I think Rybakina is the favorite to come out of this particular section, looking at her early draw. The only random, outside name maybe is Danielle Collins. But again, we haven't seen her play enough tennis to really jump in and confidently support her here.
Yeah, tough spot for Collins, too. I mean, to have to play the winner of Konyu, Rogers there second, and whether it be Kontaveit or Towson. But I like what you said, Steve, about Kontaveit. Not only that, just a quick reminder, what we saw at the end of last year was an anomaly. Historically speaking, Kontaveit has struggled, to kind of keep the ball on the lines on hard court. Mm-hmm. She struggles mentally and to be consistent. And, what we've seen recently, again, over the last 6 months, which is a large enough sample size to think it might continue, is a bit of an anomaly. And I think that match against Krejcikova specifically is the first big moment that didn't really go her way. You look at her run, even the matches she lost, it was kind of off a long week, or like you said, against a better player. But to hand Krejcikova the bagel and then kind of fall apart like that a couple times, I wonder how she's going to carry that mentally into this tournament. I wish Towson were in a little better form. That could be a fun match. And, she has 2 matches or so to work through it, I think. But I'm happy to go against her. I think this is a great spot for Rybakina, who I think has definitely been building up to this. She did withdraw from the last tournament with a thigh injury, and I'm not necessarily saying that was a lie, but I don't know if maybe that was a super duper serious injury that kept her from playing tennis, as opposed to traveling, getting here, getting comfortable, and getting some reps, before the tournament started. She has a great draw. The first couple matches look pretty comfortable. Again, whether it be Kontaveit, Towson, or maybe even Collins, who, had some great form after getting a surgery and getting herself healthy last year. Could be tough, but it looks kind of smooth sledding for me until she gets to the quarterfinals there and even beyond. So, like Rybakina quite a bit. Any other thoughts on this quarter before we jump into the 4th and final?
No.
Similar to the men's draw, there is a person here who is really, really happy about how this draw went. Iga Swiatek, someone who hasn't had a ton of success on hard courts if you go back and look overall, but has a title in Adelaide from last year, has made a couple runs here at the Australian Open before, but running into better players or the eventual champions. She sits here at the top of this quarter. With all due respect to Daria Kasatkina, who's been playing some good hard court tennis, I don't see anybody on kind of the top half of this draw that's going to even scare her. You look at the bottom section there, and I'll just rip the Band-Aid off right now. With all due respect to my beloved Aryna Sabalenka, sorry, I spelled the name wrong. There should be a D there before the B because something's wrong, and it's really just a bummer. I don't know, again, whether it doesn't seem like it's a physical thing. For those of you that watched the match the other day, the chair umpire did check on her, and she said she was fine. So something's wrong. If for those of you that watch baseball from time to time, there's a catcher who can't throw it back to the pitcher, or a first baseman who can't, make the throw to the pitcher as well. And it just seems something like that. Who knows? But given that Sabalenka's kind of out of this and all the other names on the right are people that maybe overachieved or we haven't seen yet, it just looks like a dream for the young Pole. What do you think, Candace?
I completely agree with you as far as Swiatek is concerned. I mean, obviously, this is assuming that the quoted rib injury isn't a super big deal, but my inkling is that it's not. This draw is absolutely incredibly kind to her. I see her making her way through the top portion of this, rather comfortably. When you go down towards the bottom, the one who's intriguing to me is Leylah Fernandez. I mean, of course, we know what she did at the U.S. Open. Since then, she hasn't played to that same level. She's kind of regressed back to what we had seen from her, which was a really good, young, talented player, but maybe not unbelievably consistent. But I do think this is a portion that lends itself to her well. So if she were to kind of work her way back to what we saw, that blip of her over in New York, I think this is a good position to do it. But ultimately, if it were to be her against Swiatek, that's a different level. She struggled against Swiatek in the past, so I would lean towards the more experienced veteran, but those are the 2 names that jump off the page to me.
If Fernandez is someone who's tough to pin down, because you go back and look last year, she won the title in Monterrey, finished second at the U.S. Open, but didn't win more than 3 matches at any other tournament all year. So it's hard to figure out kind of what was real and what wasn't. She does have kind of a soft spot here to get started. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think this is a great, as you said, a great draw for Iga. She should be relatively untroubled through that first week of the tournament. Again, I think similar to Medvedev, she's probably her own worst enemy at times. I guess that's probably going to be one thing to keep an eye on there. But I don't think unless Petra Kvitova finds is another one to turn back the clock 5 years or so. I'm not seeing a lot of threats in that first 4 rounds for Swiatek. I don't think Pavlyuchenkova will be making it to the second week. And then looking to the bottom, the name that maybe is a little bit under the radar is one of the Melbourne Park specialists in Ann Lee, I think, who would face Sabalenka in the second round there potentially. I think she's one to keep an eye on in the first week. And Angelique Kerber is another with Leylah Fernandez. They might be able to get that rematch from the US Open there. So it'll be interesting to see how that bottom section plays out, or if Sabalenka just turns up and has decided that she has remembered how to serve overarm instead of underarm come Tuesday at the Australian Open. So Lee is the longer shot, but I think Iga is the one to beat in this quarter.
Yeah, I love all the names you guys covered. Lee is someone who specifically is pretty good on these courts for whatever reason. It'd be fun to see Samsonova, Vondrasova, one of those two kind of make a run here through, but it does seem like it comes down to Iga or not. Anything here to add, guys, on this quarter before we wrap and jump into our picks?
No, I'm happy to keep on moving on.
It's nice and smooth the first time, Steve. Let's keep it going.
I know. Wow. We will start this time maybe with Candace, if we could have your ace for the tournament.
Okay, my ace is going to be controversial with our cast, but I'm going with Simona Halep. I mean, it would be a big ask to win here right off the bat, but I do like her draw. I like that she's in that middle section, kind of away from some of the bigger names. I like what we've heard from her coming into this tournament. She sounds really positive and confident, which is something that we certainly didn't hear last year. And I would say at times during her career in general, we just haven't heard. She's kind of mentally been up and down at times as far as her confidence is concerned. So I liked hearing that positivity from her. She's played well coming into this. You know, we'll see how she holds up here in a longer tournament physically, because we know that's been the issue for her.
Oh, fuck.
No.
Oh, sorry. I thought I closed out the tab.
Her. There were a few times I thought maybe we'd have her back last year and it didn't happen, but we'll see now. And nobody heard any of that. So fun.
Apologies for cursing. I thought
you know
I closed
what?
out the tab.
It might be better. It might be better that way, because when she loses like round 3, they can't like clip it and be like, "Oh, look what this idiot said." So there you go.
That's fine. I'm not going to be able to clip it anyway, because when you cut out, Alex swore. So because he thought he'd turned off the show completely. So that's gone well. So Simona Halep, that's all right as Candace's ace for the tournament.
She took down the show. That's how wild of a take it is.
We'll just keep rolling on. Obviously, they didn't want you to say, your internet didn't want you to say Halep, so that's fine. Rolling on, so my ace is Ash Barty. I think if you had to pick one person in the tournament, the lead-up form is exceptional, including that straight set win over Rybakina in the final in Adelaide. She's taken the week off. She hasn't overdone it coming into the tournament. And I think the scheduling with, the quarterfinals and semifinals, semifinal in particular, now being scheduled at night with the change of scheduling for this year at the Australian Open. I think that all helps Barty. I don't think she'll see a lot of day sessions. I think the night sessions are most suited to her, so she's my pick of the bunch here for the women's. Alex, who have you gone for as your ace?
Well, we just talked about, Iga Swiatek. It's, tough picking somebody from the fourth quarter in both tournaments, but she's the best spot in the draw. I think she's one of, if not arguably, the most talented player on tour. Yes, she tends to be better on different surfaces, but I think she has a game to do just fine here. Again, the draw is spectacular. I think she, kind of walks into the final without too much trouble. I mean, she should be a pretty strong favorite. Again, unless Sabalenka kind of snaps back into some form here, which I'm not counting on, she should be a pretty comfortable favorite all the way through to the finals. So really like her chances, and she is my pick.
And for anyone interested in my value pick, just rewind about 45 seconds and listen to what Alex said, because mine is also Iga Swiatek there as my value selection for the tournament. And Candace, who have you gone for as your value pick?
I've gone with Madison Keys. I mean, I really do think her performance coming into this tournament has been really nice against lesser competition. I really am maybe I'm overthinking the win over Coco, but I do think it was a big deal. I mean, Madison Keys, at least from an American's perspective, is somebody who, when she was 18, 19 years old, we heard about her all the time. We spent, instead of watching center court of the U.S. Open, we were watching her over on court 17 because she was a really, really big deal. And that attention has certainly waned over the last few years. And so for her to kind of get that kind of a confidence boost and win over a fellow American, I think it's a big deal coming into this tournament. And I like her draw. So if she continues that level of play, she should be able to at least make a nice impression here.
And Alex, who have you gone for as your value pick?
Miss Krejcikova. I mean, she's floating around 20-1 or better at a bunch of different places, and I think she should be down closer to 10, maybe in some single digits. Again, given how well she's played over the last year. She comes off a title here. She's in a nice spot in the draw. I mean, her section specifically isn't really too bad. I love the way, again, she's playing tennis. I know, again, she has to go through Barty to get to the finals, but I think there's just a ton of value in her at 20-1 or better.
Yeah, and I agree. I think as long as she's not too fatigued from that Sydney week, I think she should be able to make her way through. And I think we touched on before consistency. I think that her ceiling may not be as high as some of the top players, but there is less of a gulf between her best and her worst. So that she should be able to make it through the early rounds of such tournaments. Now, switching now to the other side of the equation with our unforced errors. So players that we can kind of rule out for one reason or another. We might start with you, Alex. Who have you gone for as your unforced error?
I should talk about it again. I had to write about it in my stupid preview. Aryna Sabalenka. She is my favorite player. I love watching her when she's at her best. The ferocity, the power, the gutsiness with which she can play at from time to time is my favorite. And oh boy, it really looked the other day like that was gone. I mean, her start to this year has been rough, and she is without her coach. Her coach is gone and working with somebody else now. And I'm sorry, she's working with Kontaveit specifically. I mean, so I wonder who's kind of driving the bus there. She just looks a little bit lost. So I'm going to keep giving her a pass. I love her. I hope everything's all right. Let me know if I can help.
I hope everything's all right, because I think on her social media today, she showed off like 4 different outfits. So hopefully they all get a run. Candace, who have you gone for as your unforced error?
I have gone for Naomi Osaka. Obviously, the injury concern only adds to the concerns that were already there for her, just as far as her kind of, mental investment in the game and commitment to the game at this point in time. We'll see what she has to offer, but her own comments coming into this, I mean, she's always refreshingly honest, I suppose, and they haven't been positive. So I'm a little bit worried about Osaka coming into here.
As am I, but I have gone for Emma Raducanu as my unforced error. I think it's notoriously hard to back up a Grand Slam title with the next Grand Slam, because all of a sudden all the attention's on you. You can't fly under the radar like she did in Flushing Meadows. So I think this is going to be a lot tougher for her here. COVID in the lead up didn't help. Winning one game against Rybakina last week probably didn't help either. So it'll be interesting to see how she handles, I guess, the pressure that comes with it. But I would rather watch her or figure out or find out without actually having a financial investment there, because I don't think there's much value in her price at the moment. On to the overvalued players. Now, who have you gone for, Candace, as your overvalued player?
I have gone for Kontaveit. I mean, Alex really went into her in a very informative way, and oh no, we're losing everyone again. Okay, we're back.
Oh, no, you're there.
And I agree with what he said, that she's kind of been on this aberration, the way that was playing towards the back end of last year. And I'm just a big believer in any sport from a mathematical perspective, that when you see reactions to something that you might even think might be an aberration, maybe over time they'll prove that it's the new normal. But when it's that early stage and you think that it might be an overreaction, to just inherently play against it, because if you continuously do that, you'll be rewarded if the player keeps continuing to be, valued in the way that she is. I mean, her odds for this tournament are ludicrous, and maybe she'll go on and prove us wrong, but I'm a believer that it's the right play to play against her, and you add to that her draw is not the easiest, so I'm going with Kontaveit.
And I've gone with the same, I think, for her. Raducanu you could probably put here as well, and move Jabeur to the unforced error with her injury lead up. But I think when you look at Kontaveit and you look at what she's been able to do, again, it's just that proving herself against the top players. And I think, when you look at the one tournament that she's really struggled, I guess, over the last couple of months to win and take away the title was the WTA finals, where she came up against, she did get a couple of wins on the board in the round robin, but couldn't get over the line in the final. So I think she is a little bit vulnerable here in terms of her price, and the fact that she hasn't really seen second week action of a Grand Slam before to this stage of her career. So I've gone with Kontaveit. And Alex, who have you gone for as yours?
Well, again, I agree with you guys on Miss Kontaveit, but to try to maybe be a little bit different. I'm curious to see. Good, you did update the graphic there. With all due respect to Candace's pick to win the tournament, I just don't think there's any value in betting on Simona Halep. But I certainly think that there is a chance for her with days off in between matches to manage the physical stress of all this and kind of finds her best tennis, which honestly we saw last week at moments. I mean, she is definitely still one of the more talented players at her top level. Again, the days off in between are huge, but she's being priced like she is going to be close to her best for the next 2 weeks. So I would have her closer to 25-1. She's closer to like 15-1, depending on where you look. So with all due respect to one of the greats, don't bet on her at these numbers.
Me picking someone to win and Alex picking them to definitely lose is how you know we're back.
Definitely lose. Come on, man.
It's like we never left. But look at us, 30 minutes on the women's, 30 minutes on the men's, all done in an hour for a Grand Slam. That's quite an efficient output from us, I think. Any last thoughts on either the men's or the women's here before we wrap things up?
Well, let's get to some tennis.
Yeah.
Finally, we'll have action from Melbourne Park in the main draw tomorrow. So about 21 hours from the time of us recording here live. So looking forward to getting along to a couple of days of the action. I'll try and take some photos on behalf of the other two members and enjoy just, the 2 weeks of the year that the time zones are actually friendly to me before everything moves back over to Europe and North America. Thanks to everyone who's tuned in live or on replay via any of the different various types of content that we produce through podcasts and video content on YouTube. If you are gambling, please do so responsibly. Any last words, guys, or shall we wrap it up there?
Ready to go.
Alrighty. Have a fantastic fortnight, everyone, and hopefully you can back a winner or 10 along the way. Have a great time enjoying tennis that isn't Novak Djokovic and his court case. I'm looking forward to my Twitter feed going back to on-court stuff. We will catch you all next time.